what we found is there's a lot of developers out there that can do those utility scale projects. They can bring the funding. They love doing the interconnection work, procuring the land, getting everything set up there, but they don't really like the EPC and the construction part of it, as far as putting that request for proposal out, evaluating the proposals, managing the project, somebody on site to make sure that project goes the right way. That's what we've been doing for a long time, 20 something years, me personally.
Are you speeding the energy transition? Here at the Clean Power Hour, our hosts Tim Montague and John Weaver bring you the best in solar, batteries, and clean technologies every week. Want to go deeper into decarbonization? We do too. We're here to help you understand and command the commercial, residential, and utility, solar, wind, and storage industries. So let's get to it. Together we can speed the energy transition.
Today on the Clean Power Hour, the easy button for clean energy and sustainability. My guest today is Russ Bates. He is the CEO and founder of NXTGEN Clean Energy Solutions. Welcome to the show, Russ.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tim. I'm really excited to be here.
It's been great getting to know you a little bit over the last couple of years, and you are up to a lot of things in solar and battery microgrids. But give our listeners a little background on yourself. You're an electrician by training, and which I just love, and then how you got interested in starting your own solar company.
Yeah, sure. Great question, Tim. So again, thanks for having me. Yeah, I started out in the electrical industry by getting into an apprenticeship program with the IBEW out of Southern Indiana. And if you're familiar with that area of the state, at least years ago, there were quite a few coal-fired power plants, and that's what I got into. In fact, I grew up on an abandoned coal mine. Both my great-grandfathers were coal miners. My best friend to this day, he is still a coal miner, still goes underground from time to time, mostly management, but he's, working for a coal company. So I spent a lot of time in fossil fuel power gen, primarily coal, transitioned into natural gas, worked with a company called Bechtel. Probably a lot of people have heard of them.
Sure.
The company I was working for at the time, we did a joint venture with them and built a 750 megawatt combined cycle plant. And that's what brought me to Ohio, where I live now. I was the vice president of that joint venture. Great experience. A lot of really talented people got to work with and learn from. And that was in 2015. After that project, I started paying a lot more attention to clean energy, to renewables. I always thought there was a lot of promise, but being in the fossil fuel side of the power gen industry, it's not really cool to say, oh yeah, I like solar or wind. That's a little bit taboo, I guess. But I recognized there was a lot of potential and started transitioning into to clean energy. I did notice, Tim, that you have small residential projects, somebody putting 8-10 kW of solar on their house. And then you have the great big projects. And that's what I got involved with, was the utility scale projects. And from there, I started looking around at a lot of rooftops, commercial, industrial types of scenarios where nobody was really, looking at that, at least in my experience in the areas I was at. And I just thought that was a shame. I thought the small, medium, and even some of the larger companies are a big part of the economy, obviously, and thought there was a way to help. Long story short, after looking around, I couldn't find anyone that really jumped into that. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to take a chance. I see an opportunity here. And that's where NXTGEN Clean Energy Solutions came from. So we're a one-stop shop, concept to completion, single point of contact company for clean energy, where we consult, develop, and then project manage. So all the way from the start to the finish.
And what year did you establish NXTGEN?
January 1st of 2021. We want to get 2020 behind us. That was a bit of a rough year for a lot of people, obviously, with COVID and the pandemic. And so January 1st, that's when we filed paperwork. So we just had our second anniversary going into year 3.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. And I didn't realize you were a Hoosier. I was born in Bloomington, Indiana myself. And my family also has a history in the coal industry. My grandpa ran a magazine called The Black Diamond in Chicago, dedicated to the coal industry. And of course, Illinois is a major coal state. I think we're still in the top 5 in the U.S. for coal production. Of course, coal production globally is starting to wane, and especially here in the United States, mostly because of natural gas prices dropping, right, and just beating coal out economically. And then there is the environmental regulations that have been stepping up, and that also contributes. And now, the vast majority of our coal assets are scheduled to be sunsetted, and the major coal plant owners and operators are all looking to migrate their fleets to wind, solar, and battery storage, mostly for economic reasons. As much as they will tout the environmental benefits of doing that, a lot of these are economic decisions, and that is why you and I work in the solar industry. The cost of solar power or solar, wind, and storage is the most competitive of any new source of power on the grid, right? And so it's just a really good time to be in clean energy. And it's a feel good, right? Because we are going to save lives. We are going to reduce the risks of climate change, and we're going to create a lot of jobs in the process. So it's really a win-win-win. So Russ, tell us a little more though about your company. What is I know you have a couple lines of business. You're a developer, you're an EPC, and you're an owner's rep. And you mentioned, you come from the utility side of the business, working on big power plants. I mean, when you say Bechtel, I think big power plants, right? They're a big infrastructure company, but what is your sweet spot for size and scope of project?
Really, the reason I started NXTGEN was for that commercial industrial sector. So I say even the mom and pop store owners who want to save some dollars, because you hit on it very clearly there, Tim. Economics is a major factor in making these decisions on transitioning. So we look out for the dollars first. The sweet spot for us is probably these commercial and industrial projects. So I'd say sweet spot anything 5 megawatts and under, but really, to me, a 5 megawatt project and a 50 megawatt project, there's not a whole lot of difference from our perspective as far as the work that you have to do. I would move that up even into the utility grade. Some can be a little bit more cumbersome, of course, depending on what's going on. But for the most part, a project is a project, and a client is a client, and we want to look out for their best interest. We put that owner's hat on, and we try to sit in their shoes, sit in their seat, put our feet in their shoes, so to speak, and understand what's it going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Is it going to still be a good decision? If not, that's where we're kind of scratching our heads a little bit and saying, is this the right move, or should we look a little bit of a different direction? And with what we're able to do, I mean, solar is big. That's the number one thing for sure. But sometimes wind makes a lot of sense. Micro wind turbines, battery storage, does that make sense or not? We look at all those scenarios. EV charging stations, that's a part of our business. And it all comes down to consultation and talking with that client and seeing what's their wants and what's their needs, and seeing how we can accommodate.
Yeah, well, that is a lot to unpack. And it's noteworthy that you're there in Ohio, in the heartland, but working nationally, going after work on the West Coast, in the Southwest, and for a relatively new company, that is a very bold move, I have to say. So kudos to you. The world is our oyster, but you can also get out over your skis, so you have to be careful and know what kind of work you can, successfully win and perform at a profit. I'm curious what your take on the C&I industry, though, is. In C&I solar, we're a latecomer to the solar party. there's more residential solar happening in the U.S. than there is rooftop commercial industrial solar. There's about 5 gigawatts of residential solar per year now in the U.S. out of 20 gigawatts of solar, and C&I is around 3 to 4. Of course, there are many corporates that are doing large power purchase agreements, but those are utility scale projects, right, that are then selling the power via virtual PPA or some form of contracted energy to those Apples and Facebooks and Amazons of the world. The C&I market is an obvious opportunity, right? Whenever you fly over a major U.S. city, you see all these large factories and warehouses and commercial buildings just begging for a solar array, or now a solar array, a battery, and some EV charging infrastructure, right? And maybe a turbine here and there. I did have a guest on the show, One Energy, that does industrial scale wind turbines. These are 2 megawatt wind turbines here in the Midwest. I tried to find a wind turbine for one of my industrial customers a couple years ago, and I gave up because it was just the supply chain is very very challenging. 2 megawatt turbines, are also used in utility scale wind, and so they were all getting bought up by the utility developers. But when you think about the C&I industry and what a great opportunity it is at face value, and yet it is a slower developing segment of the solar and storage industry. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think you're exactly right, Tim. There's such a tremendous opportunity, and it really comes down to decision making. You can go through and give the preliminary designs and budgetary financials. They all go through the ROIs and all that good stuff. But someone actually has to commit and want to do it. So who owns these facilities? When you're dealing with corporations, it's similar to dealing with the government, right? There's a lot of red tape that has to be gone through. The initiatives help. Certainly what the SEC is talking about when we're talking about the commercial, and industrial falls into that too. But what the SEC is talking about as far as disclosures and how that's going to flow up and down the supply chain. As far as this clean energy transition, that helps. But what we're seeing is a lot of, I'll call it can kicking. People are talking about it, but they're not moving on C&I as fast as I would like to see them, I'm sure. So that's one take that I see. Another is you'll have an owner of a building, let's say warehouse facility, big distribution center type of building. And usually a lot of times someone's leasing that building, right? So they really have no say over what they can do to that building as far as changing things, putting a solar array up on top of the roof or something. Right. And I think that's a bit of a problem because if I'm the building owner, what's in it for me? It gets back to the economics we were talking about earlier. If they feel good about it, sure, but it's hard to get through the door and talk to that decision maker and let them understand here's the tax incentives. You can actually increase your revenue from that tenant by selling them clean energy. They're going to be happy. You're going to make more money. That's a win all the way around. But it's hard for everybody to understand that and getting to the right people. And with so much misinformation out there, in my opinion anyway, about clean energy and the benefits and the costs and all that kind of stuff, it does create some barriers. So that's what I see from our experience with a lot of the C&I opportunity that's out there. It's coming, but it's slower than what I think it should be.
Yeah, you put your finger on one of the fundamentals. That is that 90% of commercial real estate is third-party owned, meaning the owner is not the tenant, and it's not owner-occupied. I'm a C&I solar developer. I'm always looking for owner-occupied facilities for the most part because it's just a quicker decision-making process. The owner is incentivized to reduce the power bill because they're paying the power bill and they own the building, and so they can decide what happens with that. A solar array is a permanent upgrade to a building, or a battery for that matter, or a wind turbine. You are upgrading the facility, and it does improve the value of the building, and that's true for these third-party owned facilities also. It's just you have to work out the incentive structure. And there are a growing cadre of companies, that specialize in this. We had a company called Catalyze on the show that does pretty much nothing but. And it's that tripartite, though, of solar, battery, and EV infrastructure that they're very focused on to make the real estate more valuable to tenants and thereby reduce turnover, improve the occupancy rate, and create more valuable real estate. It's coming, right? The EV transition is now, I think we hit 20% in California of new car sales being EVs or battery electrics. And that's right on par with the average in Europe, even though some northern European countries are much higher, like Norway is 80%. But the iceberg is melting in the U.S. and the writing is on the wall that in 5 to 10 years, the majority of new cars will be EVs, and then you need a lot of charging infrastructure, and we have to start installing that infrastructure today, right? Because it takes time. You can't just flip a switch and all of a sudden have the entire U.S. highway network with good charging infrastructure. So it's a good thing that we have that the IRA legislation, of course, which has some incentives in it for electrification, and we're going to electrify heavy industry too. So we're going to need a lot more electricity. And then the other good news is that landowners and rural communities can relax a little bit about this wave of clean infrastructure. We're not going to pave over the breadbasket. We just need 1 to 2% of the landscape to put those fields into solar farms. And of course, there's many existing rooftops that we can solarize, and you and I are all about that. And it's a both and, though. We want solar fields and we want solar rooftop arrays. So tell us a little more, though, about a project or a case study, if you would, about, like what's a really good customer for you, and how does a solar and battery microgrid really impact the bottom line of a facility owner?
Yeah, the economics, wow, we keep going back to that, but it's really where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, with these projects. It has to pencil out the right way. So that's whenever we talk to our clients, that's what we're really looking at first and foremost is, what's the return on investment? What's the savings projection? Things like that. So whenever we go through a project, we'll develop it. Let's say it's a solar project. We'll put together a preliminary design and budgetary financial proposal, go through it with them. If they like that, that moves us into a limited notice to proceed. And from there, we go out for competitive bids. So I think it's important for everybody to understand at NXTGEN, we're not self-performing these things. We don't do the installations. We don't do that detailed design and engineering. Sometimes we'll help with procurement if it makes sense. But we put these things out for competitive bid. So the Bechtels that we were talking about earlier, the B&W Foslers, who I know you're familiar with that company, and then a growing number. I mean, we've got so many providers in our network, both big and small, that we can reach out to and put these RFPs out to, and then we'll manage those projects. So the ROI has to match up with what that customer's expectations are. And a big part of that, I know you're very familiar with this, Tim, is the investment tax credits that are available, and making sure you put that project in that's going to match up, and that client can actually get those investment returns back. So that's something we make sure is going to be part of that, because the IRA changed a lot of things, right? Domestic content, that's going to be a big deal. It's already turned into a big deal. I think everybody's still waiting to see what the IRS says as far as guidelines on the IRA that's come out. So it really has to match up. Everybody's a little bit different. The driver for some is going to be, hey, we want to have clean energy, and as long as it doesn't cost us any more money than what we're paying the utility, that's great. It's more important for them to get that sustainability box checked. And for others, it's all about the dollar. Hey, if this makes us enough money, that's what we'll do, especially when you're talking about third-party investors and PPAs, of course. So really, there's no cookie cutter, I guess, but it's got to make sense penciling out one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this about sustainability versus bottom dollar. And only about 10% of company owners really care about the environment. And in a way, rightfully so. It's not easy to run a business, whether it's slow growing or fast growing. There's just different challenges, and surviving is what they're most about, right? Surviving and thriving. So I almost never lead with the sustainability aspects of solar. Now, if I know that they have a significant, ESG component and are really concerned about sustainability, then fine, we'll talk about that. And of course, solar and battery are a great way to decarbonize their local grid and reduce their carbon footprint. Let's talk a little bit about your company specifically. You've got a good group of staff under your belt now. You're working in several markets. What is the Russ Bates approach to becoming a successful developer?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, Tim. I'd have to think about that a little bit, but off the top of my head, I'd say it's understanding the market and what that client wants. We're all the way, south in Texas. We're in Florida, over on the East Coast. I was in Connecticut a few weeks ago, and in Boston, I guess 2 weeks ago, talking with folks. And I'd say the biggest thing is understanding what's the goal of that client, because it does vary. Kind of talking about the driver. I think there are a lot of business leaders that really, really want to do the right thing, so to speak, and help the environment. But to your point, it's not that easy. There's dollars that have to be spent and invested in this movement. And what's that return going to be? Because a lot of people are looking quarter to quarter. And I tell folks, whenever you're making the investment in clean energy, remember it is an investment. It's you don't have to be Warren Buffett is one of the things I say, but you can't be a day trader. So whenever you're asking, what do I look for whenever we're out developing projects, really listening to what the client is hoping to accomplish. And then again, sitting in the seat of that client, that owner, and driving towards that and being realistic with them. If they're looking for something that's not going to happen, we just tell them, hey, this is not going to work. Or we've told people you shouldn't do this project today. If there's a big rooftop and, in 5 years, you're going to have to be a replacement. All right, guys, as much as we would love to do this, if I was you, I wouldn't do it because of this. And let's wait and let's plan. And maybe we can get this roof done a little bit quicker, blah, blah, blah type of thing. But I guess the biggest thing, Tim, long-winded answer to your pretty easy question is listening to the client, whoever that may be.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more. I like that. And there's also educating them, right? We solar developers have to do a lot of education to explain what exactly is solar, what happens at the end of life, how does a battery figure in. It's fairly deep water for facility owners and business owners, whether they're doing a CapEx project and going to self-own the system or doing third-party ownership, a power purchase agreement, especially when it comes to energy storage. And I like to say that solar and storage is a team sport. You need partners who can truly dissect and put together what is the value proposition or the value stack, we like to say, with storage, for example. The value stack varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Of course, with solar, the main thing is, well, what is the price of power? What is the customer paying for kWh, right? Because that's the main offset that solar is going to provide. It's going to reduce your load of kWh. And if you have net metering, which you pretty much need to have a solar industry, the exception being maybe now California, which is going beyond and into new territory, right? They've just killed net metering as we know it in California with NEM 3.0, but it's not going to kill the industry, and that's because of storage, long and short of it. You know, batteries are a multifaceted technology. They can not only store electrons and inject them on demand instantaneously, but then provide other services, you know, to knock down demand charges, or here in the Midwest, we attack capacity charges with a battery. Capacity charges are a cousin to demand charges. And if you don't have, a certain tariff, for example, a battery may or may not work. You absolutely need time of use tariffs. So anyway, these facility owners really need us energy professionals to explain all this and to help them figure it out and see if it's going to make economic sense for them. They're used to investing, their time and money in projects, installing new lines on their factory floor, investing in R&D, opening new markets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a question of how to calculate that ROI. And
that's their specialty, right? Whatever their line of business. And, this is our specialty, and being able to explain it, which is why they call us in. You're spot on as always, Tim. They need some help. They want to talk to the experts that can do this. And something I've seen is, even if a company has sustainability professionals, a chief sustainability officer or what have you, they're still looking at stuff from about 50,000 foot because that's their job. How do they turn these goals and ambitions and projects into a reality that's going to save them money and return on that investment? Most of the time, they're not sure. And that's where, folks like us can come in and say, well, hey, you could do this, or you could do this, or a combination of things. That's a really good point, Tim.
So as you grow NextGen Clean Energy, what do you see for the future of your company in terms of, the solutions you're providing, and the markets that you're most interested in? If you're a facility owner listening to this podcast, whose ears should prick up about Russ Bates and NextGen Clean Energy?
Really, anybody that can make decisions on the facility, and whether it's a PPA or they're going to own it themselves, whether it's solar, which is again the number one, but maybe some micro wind. Maybe you combine those two generation sources, and you do have a battery storage system that's part of it, and EV charging. Really, anybody that's needs some help with clean energy and sustainability, we're able to bring some solutions. And as I've said many times, I do not know everything, but I've got a great network of professionals, people like you, Tim, people all across the nation, actually across the globe, that are happy to help and really believe in doing the right thing. So we have access to those folks and those relationships, but really happy to jump in and help. We do free consultations. Initial consultation doesn't cost a thing. We'll take a look and see what makes sense. And if something doesn't make sense today, maybe it does tomorrow, and we'll tell you that.
So, I'm also curious about the utility market. You're doing some work with some very sizable utility scale projects. How do you approach that, and what are the services that you're providing on these utility scale projects?
No, I'm glad you asked that. So whenever I started the company, the very, very first year I was approached, just my name had kind of got out, and being in the power gen industry, people knew who I was a little bit. So I was asked to bring our company in and help on basically an owner's rep type of role. Oh, it was a project in Texas, the first one that was over 400 megawatts. And I thought, wow, that's a great opportunity. Wouldn't that be really cool to do? But I had to stop myself because we weren't set up, right? We didn't have the right infrastructure in place, brand new company. So we turned that down. Otherwise, I was going to be down there doing it myself and not growing the company. But since then, we've been able to grow. And what we found is there's a lot of developers out there that can do those utility scale projects. They can bring the funding. They love doing the interconnection work, procuring the land, getting everything set up there. But they don't really like the EPC and the construction part of it, as far as putting that request for a proposal out, evaluating the proposals, managing the project, somebody on site to make sure that project goes the right way. That's what we've been doing for a long time, 20 something years, me personally. And then we've got, again, a lot of folks that they can come in and help. So that's something we're seeing on the utility scale projects. We've got a 305 megawatt in Texas that's going to start later this year. That's exactly what happened. Somebody heard our names, developed a relationship, and decided, hey, we think you'd be perfect to do this. Checked us out, obviously, but signed the agreement. We're in business to work with them on that, and some other projects out in California too.
Very cool. So if you're an EPC, you want to know Russ Bates because he's looking for EPCs to fulfill his and his customers' projects' construction needs. I also was thinking about resiliency. And, the grid outage, of course, a couple years ago now in Texas was a major wake-up call, but we have windstorms and fire in California that's causing blackouts. We have winter storms that cause blackouts here in the Midwest this year. What do you say, and how do you frame resiliency for your customers? Because sometimes it's very difficult to put a price tag on resiliency. Every business is different, right? And the value of having uptime during a grid outage is different for everyone.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tim. It does. It matters to the person who's going to be shelling out the dollars. What's it going to save me? And again, I don't think whenever we're talking about that, not too many people are thinking environment on that. You and I are, but that's not front of mind for a lot of business owners whenever they're considering this. So it really depends. I can think of one client that they would have at least once to twice a year. They would have an outage at their facility where it would just shut everything down. They lost power. Is a manufacturing facility, and couldn't do anything. So we started talking. I asked them, how much money does that cost you when you have to shut down? And they said, oh, it's easy, $100,000 a day that it costs us. I'm like, wow. And you have that twice a year? Oh yeah, at least twice a year we have that. So there's $200,000. You add that into what they're going to be saving from a clean energy system with battery storage, and it pays for itself really, really quick. And that's just what they lose in wages and stuff like that. That doesn't count supply chain, and if there's any liquidated damages because they're not getting a product to a site whenever it needs to be out. So they actually make electrical equipment. So something you can relate to there. But yeah, it varies. It really does vary.
Yeah, everybody wants everyone wants to be able to operate off grid. The question is, what is your appetite? Because it can get expensive to install a big enough battery to have true 24/7 operation from solar and battery, or solar, wind and battery for that matter. It is totally doable. You just have to scale up the project. And then different manufacturers, for example, it's more costly when there's a brownout or a blackout. We found, for example, injection molding is one where brownouts even are quite expensive, and they have an uncontrolled shutdown, and then they have to clean out all the equipment, and you can avoid that with a battery, right? That gives you ride through and do what we would call a controlled shutdown if you're anticipating that the grid is going to be down for a little while. And then there are local incentives, right? Here in Illinois, we have a $250 per kWh incentive now on batteries. And so that means the battery is cash positive in 2 years with the combination of the ITC, the investment tax credit, and this cash incentive for kWh of the battery. So, well, what else should our listeners know about you and NextGen Clean Energy Solutions, Russ?
Wow, you're getting some good questions, Tim. I guess I think we've hit on a lot of them, but really, we try to say we're the easy button for clean energy and sustainability. So if you need something, and let's say you've got a project, you can talk to us: solar, a wind, EV charging, battery storage, solar lighting. We do that as well as far as street and parking lot lighting. That's a lot of people to talk to, especially if you're going out for competitive bids. That's a lot to digest, and we're able to take care of that. Again, we put that owner's hat on. That's very important to us. Our core values include quality customer service and long-term relationships. So we live it, we breathe it. Everybody that's part of the organization, that's their values as well. So whenever you're talking to a NextGen employee, a representative, that's at top of their mind. Really, I guess short and sweet, that's what we're about.
Wonderful. Well, check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I love to hear from my listeners. I get lots of great ideas about technologies and companies that we should cover on the Clean Power Hour. I want you to know that we're doubling down on the solar industry this year in 2023 and 2024. We're telling the stories of installers, EPCs, and developers. So reach out to me if you have a good story to tell. Thank you, Russ Bates, CEO and founder of NextGen Clean Energy Solutions, for coming on the Clean Power Hour. How can our listeners find you, Russ?
Easy way to find me is on LinkedIn, Russ Bates. I should pop up pretty easily there. You can also email me, Russ at NextGen Clean Energy, NXTGEN Energy, cleanenergy.com.
Awesome. Well, as I like to say, let's grow solar and storage. I'm Tim Montague. Thank you so much, Russ.